Now, as I mentioned, Morgan Stanley is making a bold call on an under-the-radar aviation company, calling it a niche green flying machine and initiating coverage with an overweight rating. I'm talking about Joby Aviation. Its shares are up nearly 12% on this call. The company is working on an electric aircraft that lands and takes off vertically like a helicopter, which Morgan Stanley says could make it a big player in the urban air mobility space. Joining me now is the analyst behind this call, Christine Liwag. Christine, it's great to have you here. How close is this technology to prime time?
First commercial service will be in 2024, Kelly. So it's something that we could see in the next few years for sure.
When we say 2024, is that like a wink, wink 2024? Or is that like a, look at what's happened with space this year, where all of a sudden we've got astronauts on these incredibly successful private missions?
I think you have to look at this market in terms of what could happen in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and then what's 2040 and 2050. So to put into context of what the urban air mobility industry is about, our $9 trillion TAM in 2050 represents about 4 to 6% of GDP in that time frame. And aviation today is 4% of global GDP, and the U.S. auto TAM is 16% of U.S. GDP. If urban air mobility disrupts the way we travel and these aircraft become more commonplace in 20 to 30 years, 5 to 6% of GDP is very reasonable for this disruptive industry. And Joby is the first one to come up with a commercial certifiable passenger aircraft with an electric vertical and takeoff landing capability.
Are they the only one in this space? And for investors who buy the name now, why do they need to own Joby here as opposed to waiting a couple of years? We've seen some high-profile stumbles with companies like Nikola. Is it better to wait until the technology is more proven and advanced?
There are many companies that are entering this space, and you're seeing them come up with SPACs. And with the pre-revenue aspect of these companies, there is a speculative nature of this. But what I like about Joby and why I do think they stand out versus competitors is they have a full-scale prototype that is flying. And the aircraft has flown over 1,000 times and has shown ability to hover, to transition from hover to cruise, and also land. And when you have a full-scale prototype and you're working on FAA certification, you're just that much closer to actually coming and having this to fruition. And also the military is using this technology. So this is not some far off flying car type concept. What these are immediate replacement to some helicopter routes.
So that's exactly what I was going to ask is where should we expect to first see this technology utilized? Military would be one option that not only could serve a unique purpose, but investors always love if there's a government contractor because it's a pretty reliable revenue stream and a huge potential market. So that being one area, where helicopters are used, I would think of a lot of like local search and rescue, maybe even news functions and that kind of thing. And why couldn't drones ultimately serve some of these purposes?
So Kelly, I guess there's a few things in your question. And the first one is routes, right? And if this aircraft takes off and lands like a helicopter and cruises like a fixed wing, one of the more immediate benefits would be anywhere a helicopter could go in short distances because you're limited by range in terms of battery today. So short distances, you could see this going from city center to airports, city center to a popular commuter point, or even to local getaways. And helicopters serve this market today. You can pay $199 to go on Blade from Manhattan and JFK. And if the Joby aircraft will be safer because it's a fixed wing with vertical takeoff and landing capability versus a single point of failure where you have more common in helicopters, this could become more commonplace, and you can see those be replaced shortly. And for example, also for tourism, you see helicopters flying over Central Park.
Yeah.
If you can have a safer aircraft to do that, why not? And also cheaper and more affordable. And that's where you can see that growth. Your second question is on autonomous vehicles and drones. For regulation, the FAA is not there to allow for pilotless aircraft for passenger travel. So for this type of airplane, you do need a pilot first. And pilotless, that comes sometime in the future, but in the more immediate future, this could be a helicopter replacement market. And for Joby, you don't need the 2050 TAM to make the investment case today. Because in 10 years, if they could be 20% of the US helicopter market, the investment case is here for Joby at a $16 price target.